A long time ago, we did some inquiries, but I cannot remember what the results were or anything.
Bill?
They're presently in a study. It's done, I believe, through Montana State University. And I think it's just coming out, and it might answer some of the people's questions about what your preference are for use of hospitals. Do you have any more information on that, Hugh?
Yeah, it's a fairly comprehensive survey. I've seen it. I don't know how all the questions are on there. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but fairly shortly.
Now, are they, what kind of a survey? Is everybody gonna get something?
I don't know. It's being conducted by Montana State University,
Okay.
and so I suppose under their direction, it should be fairly comprehensive and fair and accurate, I would guess.
I think they were doing a sampling, as in any survey, they've determined a certain number can answer the questions, and I just don't
Well,
know
like,
the.
you know, the Fish, Wildlife and Park calls me every year, you know, and does a hunter survey, and I think that they do it on anybody that buys a license. So that, to me, anybody that owns property in the county could be canvassed and found out if they used, them or a member of their family have used the facilities in the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. I've been here 26 years and I've never used the facility, so, but that's just me.
Well, I think the hospital has records too of where people come from and,
Well, like I said, I just wondered if it was, you know, 90% of the hospital visits are done by 10% of the population.
I don't know. We'll have to see when their survey comes out. It'll be interesting to know.
Yes, it would.
Because at one time, not all of the nursing home residents were from Broadwater County.
right.
Yeah, I know that they had some other people that come up from Gallatin County and stuff. In fact, one of the guys I went to high school with, his mother was over here at the facility for years.
Really?
And I grew up in Gallatin County.
John?
John Wright. I got a good question, and it won't cost us nothing, not any trouble. Is on the next election or ballot, to have one entry on there, making this same little question, maybe with 2 or 3 different places you could sign. It wouldn't cost much money, and it would all be right there, and it would be done, and then we'd all know what the major feelings of the hospital. Because it appears to me there is a few that's pushing for the points of the hospital, and many, just like this gentleman back here, I don't go to the hospital, I go to Helena.
You wouldn't be able to have them sign it because that takes away the secret ballot.
No, what I'm saying is to have an issue on there where they could check it off and where it could be picked up easily.
Not everyone votes, unfortunately.
Bill?
Hopefully this survey will answer some,
Touche.
will answer some of these questions.
I would say the survey, and hopefully it goes to everybody.
And that's free.
It's not gonna go to everyone, it's gonna be a sampling, I'm sure.
I understand about 800.
That's what I was.
Somebody just said 800.
800 out of how many in this county? That's not gonna really be a good
4,000.
survey.
5.
5?
In excess of 5.
Thank you for your time.
Anybody else with questions?
Thank you for your time.
No, other than, maybe we should check on that survey and ask if it can be sent to everyone. I mean, if they're gonna have it out, that's the way you get a good one, I mean. It's
Yeah,
my
because
idea.
800 isn't very many,
No,
not in a county this size. Bill?
Patsy Kraus is the person to talk to. She's the person in charge of doing the survey at the hospital. So I think if you want to, or somebody wants to contact her, she knows a lot more about what's going on because she's doing it.
I can contact her. Patsy Kraus?
Krause, I believe.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Can I make one more comment about the hospital issue? There's another issue in having the hospital here, and that's what kind of business you can recruit to this community. Because some businesses need to be close to where there's immediate medical attention for reasons of their own insurance and stuff. And so, if you come out and say 25% use the hospital regularly, that's 25% who do. They may also be low-income people, but this is the only access they have because they can't get down the road. The other issue to that is, will you be able to recruit new businesses to this community and keep the community viable going forward? And that's also a consideration we need to take into account.
You know, another thing to consider is the realtors in this county will tell you that when people come here, from other places and look, they wanna know what you have for medical facilities. Right, quick, especially, I mean, there's lots and lots of older people moving in here, and they wanna know that they have medical facilities available to them.
Obamacare's gonna take care of it all.
Wasn't gonna go there, but.
But you're right, because my husband was a type 1 diabetic, and yeah, he was healthy when we moved here, but having the emergency room was a big concern.
Well, I know the realtors will tell you that it's a very big concern when people come here, especially the older folks, and they want to move here, they wanna know
Mm-hmm.
about the facilities that are available.
He's back. Can I sit next to you? That chair's got more padding. You'd think my fat butt.
No, I was the only one having the problem.
Oh, gee.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the monies that the hospital would like, is that for necessity or, you know, sprucing it up? Or could the public that are interested find out what exactly those monies would go toward?
I'm sure that the public can find out. We have not been told yet what the money's being used for. I'm sure it's not for sprucing up, I'm sure it's necessities. Don?
This isn't what I've heard. I've heard it's gonna be, they're gonna change a lot of the building itself inside.
Oh, really?
Yes, put different departments into different areas and rearrange it a lot. And sorry I missed part of it, I might be repetitious here, but, I can't see any reason that they can't operate like a business. I mean, they've been donated to, and I'm for the hospital 100%. But it's time it learned to operate on its own to an extent. And if you was having a foreclosure on your home, would you turn around and remodel the whole thing? No, you would take and operate it for a while, maybe get a reserve of some money. Kyle, in one of the meetings, how do you put this, I don't wanna be completely off. He said that the safety issues, everything is passed. They're good for the, rest home, it's all been passed. Okay, why not operate it as it is now and get a reserve built up? Start learning to operate on their own to an extent. And operate like a business. You and I operated like this is being operated, we wouldn't be here. At least try. And then, if they need help, fall back. But try, do it on your own first.
Hugh?
Madam Chairman, my name is Hugh Van Swearingen. I've been on the hospital board about 6 years, and I'm the treasurer and secretary of the board of the corporation. About the, we are discussing some remodeling, I wouldn't call it remodeling, but changing around of the room structure in the building. We don't look at those to be terribly expensive. For instance, there's thought of moving the physical therapy downstairs where it's more accessible to the public. Building isn't, it's hard for some people to get up those stairs in the elevator system. Anyway, and we don't need maybe the administration downstairs, it might be working upstairs, so some of the stuff we're looking at, I don't think is terribly expensive. To my knowledge, the hospital has never operated on a profit that in terms of our income from patient services. That would be the hospital for patient services. It's always relied on fundraising campaigns. They've always had fundraising campaigns for this hospital, is my understanding. They used to have an annual ball. As such, when we are heavily dependent on Medicare and Medicaid patients, the government is not lavish in those payments. We have a huge amount of charity care. It's been said here, $300,000 to $400,000 a year. Whether this would ever, I don't see it, and we've had good business people on the board who look at every expense very hard. And I don't think that we'll ever be able to operate on a profit on our operations. We always need fundraising drives. We always will, I think. It's my honest opinion. I just don't see it. It just don't. Sarah was on the board for many years.
10 years, and the government has all of these unfunded mandates. You know, when for instance, if Don does something for me, you know, I may bake him some cookies, ha ha ha, but he gets reimbursed somehow. Yeah. But the hospital doesn't get, you know, you've gotta treat everybody who walks into that emergency room willy-nilly, but they're not gonna come up and say, oh yeah, here, we're gonna pay you for it. And I don't know of a hospital in the United States that doesn't have fundraisers and all sorts of stuff,
I think you're right,
but.
John.
I got a question, responding back to the gentleman back here. He answered part of the question, but he didn't answer where all this money, this $600,000 is gonna go over 3 years. Where is it gonna go? Where's it gonna be used other than the trivial things, like he says, shouldn't cost too much money?
Oh, I can't answer all of that. It's gonna be fairly elaborate. I mean, the response to that, many categories of expenses we're running into. And some of it is fairly urgently needed right now. We're gonna be, as we switch over to opening a nursing home again, we're going to have some expenses. I'm not prepared here to detail because I don't know, but I'm sure that Kyle and the group, if we get that on the ballot, we will have to come up with a good justification to the community. We certainly will, or we're going to lose again. We will, just like we did last time. The public was not satisfied that we made a case. They said, no, we have to do a better job of making our case. We have to.
John, I would suggest that you get a hold of Kyle over at the hospital and go to a board meeting. That's who could
Thanks,
really
but no
answer.
thanks.
Oh, okay, the choice is yours, but I would just think they could answer.
The choice is mine to ask you the question, to tell me what I wanna know.
Come on
And you
in,
should
Doug.
know.
Come on in, Doug. Don.
I got one more comment, and I've heard that this hospital is thinking about a few things that, let's don't compete with Helena, let's don't compete with Drake Falls, and let's don't compete with Bozeman. This is a little hospital, it's a little town, it is needed, I totally agree on that, and I'd hate to see it go down. But there's certain things that this hospital doesn't need,
I said that.
and we haven't had for quite a few years. That's why we have the ambulance service goes to Helena, I've been on it 3 or 4 times in the last few years, and my gosh, I'm still here. So let's don't compete with big business hospitals. Keep this to where it should be.
Absolutely. Something everybody should think about.
I just came to talk to you about the transportation and retirement funds for the school. A week or so ago, Mr. Rabindall came to me and asked if we needed to amend the resolution. There was never a resolution made that these taxes would be raised. It was just an agreement between us and the schools. And I've got the Puget Sound funds there were 711,512 funds from the protested taxes that were released. After we paid Puget Sound the amount that we owed them for interest and their 10%, it ended up bringing $549,426 back into the county funds. I just did a quick math. It's just very, very quick and very
Down and dirty.
not detailed. And it looks like about 200,000 of those funds went back to these retirement and transportation funds. The long and the short of it is the countywide transportation, all these funds are now soluble again. They're to the point where we won't have to mill any extra taxes for 3 years like we thought. That's taken care of. The
Good job.
countywide transportation fund has $28,139 in it. The countywide retirement, which is the high school retirement, which was the one that got the most from the Puget Sound, has $489,673 in it, and the elementary retirement has $20,045 in it. So we've got excess going into this tax year. It should, if anything else, it should bring the mills down a little bit
Make the
from what they
school
would
happy.
be. Pardon
That
me?
should make the school people happy.
Yeah, the only thing, I talked to Pam last week, Pam Watson from the school, and she said they kinda took a hit on their retirement this year, and she thought they were gonna have to raise it a little bit. It sounded like it was state, new legislation that went in. So we might not be able to drop it as much as we would have, but it should drop this year from what it normally would, and it will drop substantially from what it was last year.
Very good.
Excellent.
Good job. Are the delinquent taxes starting to come in pretty good?
The mobile homes are just delinquent in it.
General.
Yeah, our delinquents aren't doing too bad on the real estate. Haven't ran a report to see exactly, to give you the numbers, but
And what about protested taxes?
the only one that's been settled has been Puget Sound. We still have, most of the other utilities still hanging out. I haven't heard anything on settlement for them, so. But Puget Sound was far and away the biggest one. They were, Puget Sound, we had more protested with just Puget Sound than all of the others put together.
Really?
What part is Puget Sound through here? Is that like the Bonneville?
As far as I know, yeah, it would be all of the, transmission lines and,
I never heard it called Puget Sound. You hardly ever hear that other than it seems like always Washington, and so I was surprised that they were over here.
yeah. Yeah, and they are the biggest utility.
So in other words, Bonneville is Puget Sound, and we still call it Bonneville Line and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that affiliation goes. I know
And I just
Puget
curious.
Sound is, as far as I understood, was all the transmission lines that run our power from here over to Washington.
From Colstrip through.
Mm. But at any rate, these funds are all sitting good right now. There should be quite a relief to the taxpayers. Just wanted to let everyone know that, and maybe get something out there so people weren't so concerned about it next year.
Hats off to you, Tim. Good job.
Hey Doug, before you go, if I may, Madam Chair, can you talk a little bit about the Puget Sound protested taxes, how long it was for, how it works out that we paid them that 10%? Just so that everybody's clear on how that all works, because we didn't pay them anything.
Right.
Right.
It went back to, they tested their taxes from 2005 to 2012, with the exception of the year 2008. They didn't protest that year. And what they did, and it varies from year to year according to the valuation that they were assessed by the Department of Revenue. They would protest 40%, 44%, 30%, whatever they thought was an unfair valuation. When we receive their money as a protested tax, we have to take the amount that they're protesting and put it in a protested tax fund. It can't be used in the county funds or the state funds. We send, out of that amount that we set in the protested fund, the state will send us a form letter each year and say, these 4 funds are the state funds, and we're requesting our portion of that money. And we send that check to the state out of the protested tax funds. The rest of it stay in the protested tax. then when the settlement is, closed and resolution's made, then the state sends them the 10% out of the state's taxes plus interest. We send them the 10% out of our tax plus interest, and the rest goes back into the county funds, whichever transportation, retirement, road, whatever funds they belong in.
So,
But yeah, it's basically when they protest their tax, it's money that is in the bank drawing interest, or in the protested tax fund drawing interest. But it's not accessible to the county for use for any kind.
so they've still paid it, but we can't use it.
Right.
But when Department of Revenue settles and says, okay, Puget Sound, you get 10% back, the reason that you would use the term "we paid them" is because we're taking it out of the fund that they
Right.
paid into that we couldn't use. So we give them their 10% and we take the 90% in
Right.
this case.
They might send us $118,000 check and say, of this $118,000, the amount we're protesting is $38,000, so we pull that $38,000 and put it in the protested tax fund. The other $70,000 would go into or the other $80,000 would go into the county funds, but the protested tax fund is just sitting there in limbo until the protest is resolved.
And how will that, the county funds of $549,426, how will that be disseminated throughout the county at this point? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't, I have 7 years worth of reports up there for Puget Sound that shows where each of it goes. That's kind of how I arrived at the $2,000 figure to go into these 3 funds. Is I went from year to year, and I just took the highest fund, which was the high school retirement, and calculated what that was. And to do that, you have to take first half and second half of each tax year and go through the report, look up the amount, add it all up. So you've got 14 different reports to go through to find the amount for one fund. So, yeah, I haven't looked it up for each fund to see exactly who's getting it. There's no magical report to say, this is all going to school. It's all broken down into years.
So if whatever percentage of the mills each different department gets every year,
Right.
they're gonna get that
Yeah.
out of this. It's not one check that comes to the county for us to decide. It goes into the
Right.
departments per the
Right.
DOR, Department of Revenue formula.
Yeah, and whatever they were milled in 2005, that's what they get out of the 2005. Whatever they were milled in 2006, that's what they get from that amount. It's on a program on the computer. It automatically figures out. It's just like the taxes. When someone comes in and pays their tax, those funds are just automatically distributed to whichever fund they go to. It's the same program.
Okay. Is it fair to say, Doug, that perhaps this error in the school funding, the OPI error, would not have fallen into the negative had we been collecting that Puget Sound tax?
It's possible, yeah. All of our utilities started to protest, and that has a lot to do with
When one
what
year's,
goes on.
when the settlement in one lump sum can bring them up to these amounts in the positive after falling into the negative like they were, it sure does point to what an impact that protesting
Well, yeah,
did
and
to those school funds.
it's just like anyone's budget. If you had to budget for any office in the county, and you budgeted $120,000 for the treasurer's office, and you found out that $40,000 of that was going to be protested, and you couldn't use it. It's just a shortfall.
Right? Although you couldn't go back and fix that error caused
Right.
by the protesting taxes by a plan worked out with the schools, like you did last fall, you would have to look at laying off, look at cutbacks. Okay,
Yeah, and these transportation and retirement funds, the school sends those funds to the county each year. And they have to be milled according to the amount of whatever the mill is for that certain fund. You have to figure out how many mills you need for each fund. It changes every year. And those are the only 4 funds, I believe, that the treasurer can go in and say, I'm changing these mills because this is what they need, this is what a mill's worth, this is the amount of mills they have to have. But
You said
the
only-
problem with it is on the form that the state sends you to change those, there's also 4 funds on top that never change.
mm,
And the funds that the mills that we were adding to these funds are not adding, but the mills that we were distributing to these funds were so close to the ones that never changed. I think that's why for 4 years they never changed. I think maybe there was a little confusion there. I can only speculate on that.
sure. But based on the fact that it's such a huge error with so many schools around the state, that makes some sense.
Right.
You said 4 funds?
Well, there's 3 in towns and there's 4 in Three Forks.
Okay,
Three Forks separates out their transportation between elementary and high school. Basically, it's the same fund number, it's 7820, but Townsend, it's just transportation. When you deal with Three Forks, it's elementary transportation and high school transportation.
okay. Thank you.
They come in the delinquent mobile taxes.
We've had quite a few payments come in, we've had a few letters come in, and we're just about ready to, do
Stickers.
turn it over to the state's office, or the sheriff's office, and,
Put the hammer down.
yeah, and really, I think we're gonna find a lot of the mobile homes that are on that delinquent tax list are probably not even around anymore.
To move it, doesn't the taxes have to be paid in full?
Legally, yeah,
County can move it though.
that's not the way it always happens. And they're so hard to track because like I said down here once before, a lot of the Department of Revenue records don't keep the VIN numbers. They basically go on a picture and the word of whoever brings it in, or a title if they have it. They don't always, they don't have a lot to go by either. I'm not trying to point the blame or anything. It just makes them hard to track. People sell them and move them overnight, and whether it's in this county or another. Or they move them up in the hills and use them for a hunting cabin or a mining cabin, and you just lose track of them.
Especially the older ones, mainly the older ones, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and a lot of them are the older ones. But no, we're about ready to make the Reds and turn those over to Brenda, and we'll see how we do from there. I know it's gonna be a burden on the sheriff's office because it's a very, very time-consuming job. It's just door to door.
Don't they have to put a large sticker, pretty colorful sticker on
Yeah,
the
Yeah.
trailer?
yeah, it's an orange sticker,
Yeah.
yep.
At a guess, how many do you think there's gonna be? You wouldn't know till you're gonna get into it.
Yeah, I couldn't even make a guess at that. I would be in numbers and not dollar amounts and not,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you mentioned 200,000, I said, it's gonna put if I had to make a guess, I'd say a couple hundred maybe. Does that sound right?
yeah, I'd say at least that many, yeah. 200, the number that sticks in my mind is about 250, I think, is the amount of delinquent letters we sent out. You know, when you print them up, it's a stack that high, but then some of them are 10 years worth of taxes that just, the trailer's been moved or the person's moved, nobody knows where it was, and we have to prove to the Department of Revenue that it's no longer in the county, and that, I guess the way that will be done is to do the writ, send the officer out there. If he can't find a mobile home, then we'll report that to the Department of Revenue, and hopefully they'll take it off the books. And yeah, I know there's some that I know of that have been delinquent 10, 11 years, that the tax notices come back every year. There's nothing on the driver's license system, nothing on the motor vehicle system to show that that person is still even anywhere in the county. You know, no idea where the trailer went. How do you track something like that?
Those homes that Goose Bay that they had to move, most of them are pretty old.
We've got, yeah, most of them are, and we've got every one of those settled. I think there's 3 that we're still working on, that one of them was the one that, and I can't remember the fellow's name, I've got it upstairs. It was the one that Steve ended up paying the 4 years worth of back taxes on. He's actually called our office a couple times. He said he was gonna come down to a commissioner meeting, and he mentioned he was gonna talk to you. I don't know if he has or not, frankly. But he said he's sure he's got receipts for all of these years worth of taxes, and I said, well, bring those to the commissioners meeting and we'll get it settled then.
Where's his name? You know,
I can't think of it right now.
must know me, I guess, so.
It sounded like he did, but yeah, I've got it written down up there if you want it.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I just can't think of it at the moment.
John?
I got a question before Doug leaves. In 2012, while we're talking about tax protests, my son and I filed up one of the properties up on Indian Creek, these mining properties, for a tax protest twice, not once, but twice. Both times was done by the officers, the previous clerk of the record, and then one of the other officers. And both times it's been rejected, or never done nothing with it. And ask Doug why it hasn't been done with a full explanation. The full means why there was a protest to start with and why the taxes changed without our consent. Ask Doug to answer that question for you.
Can you answer that, Doug?
I can't answer why the taxes changed without his consent. There would be a valuation sent out by the Department of Revenue, if the amount of the taxes changed. As far as the protest, the only thing I can go by is what I read on the documents in our office. For a tax to be protested, the statute says that it can only be protested the amount of increase from the year before. It's up to the property owner to claim the amount of protest on the protest tax form. The protest tax form we have has no amount on it. The tax was actually paid, and a tax to be protested, it can't be delinquent. And the tax was actually paid 2 days after the due date. So that's the only explanation I can give is the amount wasn't on the form, and it was after the date the taxes were due.
That was just on one part of it, not the whole amount. We filed 2 of them, and they were on time. Now, this whole business with us requesting the tax protest was based on, we didn't tell the difference. We protested all of it that was increased because we did not give the state the authority to increase our, through a manipulation that's incorrect things, which is the reason I brought charges against Doug and his department.
Which
As-
is the reason I'm not gonna talk anymore about this. It's
Okay, well then,
brought
just
against
be
me.
still.
I think it should be done in
Okay.
court,
I
and I
agree.
won't talk about it anymore.
Yeah,
You should talk to the Department of Revenue, I think, John.
I don't go there.
Well, that's where you should go, perhaps.
I hate to be lied to anymore, and I get lied to here in town. Just what comes from Doug is nothing but a barefaced lie.
And now, Tim,
Madam Chair, Tim Ravendall, thank you, Doug. Just for point of clarification, I did come to Doug a couple of weeks ago requesting what we were going to do as taxpayers to be able to get notice out to the people in regards to the decision by this board and Doug to levy taxes for 3 years on the citizens of Broadwater County to make up that shortfall. The shortfall originally was stated as an error in kind, if you will, nothing to do at the original onset with Puget Sound protested taxes. Regardless of what the reason was, it was pointed out that we needed to pay 3 years, broke down to get that fund allocated. To my knowledge, after asking the question how we were going to undo that 3 years, I was advised that the decision was arbitrary to put those taxes on. There was not really a formal action taken to put those taxes on the citizens in the first place. So therefore, that's why there was no reason for a resolution of such to undo that action. I still question, please, Madam Chair, make an official vote or order or something that makes sure that the citizens of Broadwater County are relieved of that expectation of that tax being allocated for that 3 years now that that fund has been repaid and is in good standing. It just seems the right thing to do.
I'm sure that the minutes will reflect that.
And I thank you, Madam Chair.
Trudy?
Yes, I just have a question regarding the utilities and when they protest their taxes. How soon do you know, for instance, when they protest 2012 taxes, how soon do you know those taxes are protested?
When we get the payment, usually the day before they're due.
Okay, so within the next year, is that usually when they're due or at the end of the calendar year?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Well, so when do they usually pay? When are they due?
The taxes for 2013 will go out in November.
Okay, and so they would
and
pay
they'll
2
be
days
due the end of
before.
November.
And so my next question is, if they have been delinquent since 2005, wouldn't one start adjusting their budgets to make up for some shortfalls? With that in mind, that those budgets, that money was not gonna be able to be used for taxes? Instead of letting it go on and on and on?
You could, it's hard to adjust on an unknown. You don't know from year to year if they are gonna protest.
But if
Or
they
when the
protested the
protest
year
is gonna be
before,
settled.
don't you have to make up for what they didn't, that you're not able to use, is what I'm saying? You used the household budget, that if you budgeted for a certain amount of money and you realized you weren't gonna get 40% of it, wouldn't you change your budget to reflect that? So wouldn't that hold true in this case as well?
On these funds,
Mhm.
these funds, when you receive the amount of funds the school needs, you also receive what a mill is. If a mill is worth 138.045, whatever a mill is, you take the amount of the mill, you take the balance that you have on hand, and the amount that the school says they need, and just do the multiplication and division, add addition and subtraction, and figure out how many meals they need for that year.
And no account is taken with any protested taxes not coming in? I mean, if all these other utilities are protesting taxes,
There's no way to
Isn't
know
there's
that
no-
they're,
there's no way
to know
to-
that they're gonna protest this year.
Well, you'll know
but you
right
know
in
that they've
December.
already protested other years.
Right.
And we've not, as, in your budgets, made any account or
That's when
additions
you,
to the
when you mail
mills?
these, that if there's a shortfall from the year before, yeah, you would make up for it,
Normally, you do that.
hopefully.
hopefully.
But that wasn't done.
Well, that's what I'm trying to find out, is there a long time frame for that to happen? Because
Well, it
If
happened
one-
over
if they
a
don't
period of
pay
about 6 years.
this year's taxes, then I would be looking at next year trying to figure out how to make up that difference.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to second guess what the utilities are gonna do. You have to assume they're gonna pay until you get the delinquent notice. They can,
Right.
like I said, Puget Sound protested 2005, 6, and 7, they didn't protest 8, so what do you do for 2009? You assume that the biggest taxpayer of the utility companies is gonna protest or not protest.
No, but 2 days after the taxes are due is in
The mill's
November
already
and your
gone
budgets,
out. It's
I understand,
too
but
late.
your budgets are being worked on for the upcoming year, and that's when you should be able to make up the difference.
Once you
Right.
get that, once you get your reports at the end of the year and figure out what, if you're in the red or in the black, that's when you should make the adjustments.
Okay.
And
It
I
just,
wanna correct one thing, the budget isn't being worked on in November when the taxes come in.
Oh,
The budget's actually solidified in September, and so it's even harder for the school and the treasurer to figure out, because there's that 4 months in there, 3 months in there between the budget solidified and the taxes coming in.
Right.
So, yeah, it's tough to figure that out. The other thing is, that's been really frustrating in this job is business accounting makes common sense. In my opinion, governmental accounting is a whole different monster.
Oh.
And it doesn't make as much sense. You can't use the common sense of, they protested their taxes for these years, therefore, I'm going to, I being the school or Department of Revenue or the treasurer, change or attempt to change a mill value to compensate for that. We can't do that.
But in
You
a
could in a
sense-
business,
but in a
but you
sen-
can't in governmental accounting.
Pardon me, but if I may, in a sense, that's what you've done by adding the $80 a year, back in November to make up the shortfall, isn't it?
what we
Added more
did
taxes,
then
but didn't change the value of a mill, right?
No, but
There were more mills
you're
added.
adding dollars to people's property taxes to make up the difference, and how is that different than
Making adjustments.
making adjustments
That's
to
right.
people's taxes when you realize that the utilities haven't paid for the upcoming year?
And then when you get paid.
When you
should
have
get paid
when you
back.
have, for one thing, when you have a black and white sheet of paper that says we're this much in the negative on these, you can say, we need this much money in these funds. If your funds aren't in the negative and you say, I need this, if I came to the taxpayers and say, I think Puget Sound is gonna protest their taxes next year, so I'm gonna raise your taxes an additional 7 mils to compensate for that.
How about reducing
not
the
gonna
people's
be-
budgets?
They're not gonna be quite as understanding as if I can come to them and say, you know, the last 6 years, we've been given a break on these taxes because you weren't milled the amount that you were supposed to. Now it's time to pay the piper. We have to get these funds back where they belong.
Well, my point is, why are we waiting 6 years? I mean, if you know they didn't pay in 2012, then when you start working on your budgets for the next year,
Don't count on it.
instead of waiting 3 and 4 more years, you've already realized you're behind a year in taxes. So that is my point, is I know that you
That's a good
can't,
point.
you can't add it to your budget because they're not solidified until September. But to wait 5 and 6 years and then say, okay,
Well,
taxpayers, it's time
2012
to
was the
pay up.
first year that
Um,
I had to mill these taxes. And I had to deal with it.
I understand.
And
I'm just a
hopefully
question.
hopefully that won't happen again. I can't tell you why it wasn't done.
Oh, I understand. I'm just going forward, you made the comment that there's
Right,
still a lot
learn by-
more
learn by your
protested
mistakes.
taxes out there, so how are we going to make a,
Once a protest is settled, they can't protest their taxes again for, I believe it's 3 years. So Puget Sound, we won't have to worry about for at least that long.
Now you can count your chickens before they hatch.
A little bit. But, yeah, the other ones aren't nearly as significant as Puget Sound. They're smaller amounts.
Would I be able to come up and get a list of those utilities as you
Sure, yeah.
requested it? Someone, okay, thank you.
Another thing, Madam Chair, for you is to answer, as you used to be a clerk recorder and treasurer, this is something that the schools can do in making up those errors or those differences. But if we made an error in the budget and didn't mill enough for, the floating mills, we wouldn't be able to do what the school was able to do with Doug last fall. We just have to cut our budgets and correct the error the next year, but we couldn't add more mills.
No.
Okay.
Well, and that's kind of tough too, because the schools are dealing with a dollar amount. We're dealing with the mills. And I can't speak for the school, I can only guess how it must work on their end. If they've got 10 teachers retiring at $20,000 each, and they know they're gonna need $200,000, I don't know if they have, due to their audit specifications, I don't know if they could say, okay, we need 240,000 this year. They have 10 teachers at 20,000, that's the amount they need. I don't know how their hands are tied to raise that amount. And it falls into that area where from what I understand after our audit last year, the school's auditor doesn't track the retirement and transportation, and our auditor doesn't track. It's kind of in a gray area where neither one of them really focus on.
I wonder if that's why there's so many errors across the state.
It could be.
What do they say why they don't track it?
Wasn't given an answer on that.
Kim?
Madam Chair, just, again, I think it's important to point out that when this whole shortfall in those two funds came about, Puget Sound was not in the discussion. It's a blessing that Puget Sound settled and brought money in to pay the bill, but the problem arose from an error in appropriating the right number of mills to cover the cost that was already known and put us in the red in the first place. So I think it's important to make sure that everybody understands that the salvation coming from Puget Sound paying their taxes is great, but we still have to make sure that we take corrective action and make sure that that doesn't happen again. And there's a good example. Having an audit that does not cover a major expense is insanity. I don't care if it's government or private. It needs to be fixed, and the communication needs to work a lot better. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I think from talking to Denning and Downing, that our audit will be looking at that closer. Yeah, Puget Sound, like you said, was a salvation. It helped the taxpayers not to have to carry this for 3 years. Did it add to the problem up until now? Sure it did. How do you have $711,000 come out of your tax base and work the numbers to correct it when you don't even know for sure that it's gonna happen from year to year? It's just.
Understood, Doug.
Yeah.
It's a complicated
It was nice,
project.
it was nice that it was settled. But it did
But the-
add to the problem, but yeah, it should have
The
been.
root of the
it should have
problem
been
was
able to
not
be-
Puget Sound in this
Right.
particular case. That's the point I think that everybody needs to remember, so we don't do it again.
Nope, and it's just, and I wish there was a way to say it's never gonna happen again. It happened 6 years before this 6 years.
You have the power. You're an elected official.
It's on me.
You got the
It's
power.
on me, yeah. But it's unfortunately, it's 3 funds that you have to deal with manually each year. You get the amount, you get the
Bring
mill,
your pencil.
you figure out how many mills you need, and if you don't mill the correct amount, you have to adjust for it next year.
Right?
And it just wasn't adjusted
It was an
the
error.
way it should have been.
Right, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. John?
I have a document here I sent to the Attorney General, Mr. Fox, relating to the documents that I've served on you, Elaine, you, Laura, you, Doug, and Carla. And this document, seeing that Mr. Slifka was exonerated from the same, I served it on him only.
Thank you for the information, Doug. It's good news. for
Thank
the
you, Doug.
citizens.
Very good news.
Thank you.
3 o'clock is it here?
I saw Justin here. Let me call, Nicole, we might be in her office. Hey, Nicole, this is Laura. Do you by chance have some gentlemen, all right? Thank you very much.
What does Tim's hat say on the front?
Carol cooked my cookies today.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you, Carol.
Shut up.
Your turn.
Come on up, Sean.
Okay, where do you want me? Left, right, or indifferent?
This one has up
Okay. I'll go right here.
Good morning, or good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yes. So, the primary reason I wanted on the agenda is to talk a little bit more about the FEMA grant that is pending and an opportunity for the county to potentially get some more match dollars toward that 25%. The DNRC has a renewable resource grant and loan program, and this year they've actually taken a stance where they're gonna put out some watershed grants. I believe they're up to $75,000. They're a non-match. And really all it takes is a synopsis of what it is, what we're trying to do, and then submit that to them for review. That's of course not a guarantee, but what I'm asking for you guys is authorization to submit that on behalf